Hello, Yvette, how are you going?
How are you?
I am good. I am super excited. So, I mean, we've been having a natter and we've been chatting sort of where this resilience is coming from and giving you a little idea of, well, really, um, today it's good cheer in the holiday season because you're kind of thinking of things that fit where people are at. But the truth of the matter is, well-being, it's not, well-being is our natural state. And where we've been so focused to look at specific external circumstances and come up with specific solutions and strategies to deal with that circumstance, the truth is there's only one problem. And the problem is that we lose sight of our inner wisdom. There's only one solution, allowing us to be whatever it is that we are in that moment and not try and force anything, because we have developed through experience of our wisdom and seeing it in action, we begin to develop that trust in that truth. So it's not an intellect game, it's an experiential thing, and you are having some aha moments, and they're your aha moments, and you don't have to overly analyze them, but those transformative light bulbs just, they impact, they switch on things, they release things, and end up having an impact on your way you move through the world without actively having to figure out what it is that changed.
Yeah.
And that's what's really beautiful about it. You know, but for the sake of marketing, this is the topic and this is the thing we're looking at. But in truth, this is a panacea for all one's ills, really. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best thing of all.
And I love it. Yeah. It is fabulous. Now, so mouse in hand, is it working? What's happening here? Okay, so let's see. So we're in good cheer, and the good cheer, this was coming, I guess for me, it was coming out of, well, if anyone's like, which most of us probably are, like each other on some level, right, and particularly us women with kids and families, and maybe partners or maybe not partners, or elderly parents or not, but you know, we still tend to be having to look after whoever is around us and be the mental and emotional labor carriers of the holiday season, if not actual physical ones. As a caterer, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So we can lose sight of that innate good cheer and get lost in the whole doing of everything. And then the answers and solutions that are often presented to us is to do things differently, or to challenge what you're thinking. And if there's anything to take away from this, it's not so much that you are lacking good cheer, it's just that you're not in touch with what is already there.
Right.
And this is the beautiful thing. And then and yeah, so hopefully from that, I was talking to a lot of women in other women over 40 spaces, particularly women who had just been freshly divorced or freshly out of a relationship, and the kids have grown and they're scattered around the world, with COVID maybe also stopping people crossing borders. So a lot of them were mentioning things about, I'm alone and therefore lonely. And that was a great source of, for them, sadness and depression and anxiety. And I just speaking to this notion of, well, when we're in touch with our inner wisdom, that sense of disconnectedness, it seems to just fall away, because,
yeah,
you know, you may be physically on your own, but that loneliness just seems to evaporate when you are operating from that larger connected energetic space.
Yeah, that inner peace.
Yeah. Because the truth is, we're not alone energetically, and we can sit in that space of loving kindness, and it has a visceral, feeling. It really is quite powerful. But so that's again one of the things that I hoped would come. So this is the welcome. The way we're going to talk about good cheer in the holidays. Now, I've been playing with, because one of the coaches was saying, stream it. So the reason I think I've been playing with this is single empty nester women over 40, because I guess that's me. Whether I'm going to sit with that for a while and see if that works, or whether I open it up again. But as well, if I'm meant to niche it down even further, that's what came to mind. Only because that's my experience. I'm twice divorced, and my daughter is 25 and she's married. And actually, for me this year, I'll be doing Christmas with her husband and in-laws. So that's an interesting, a new way of doing things. But this is why I think I was doing that. Because I think, well, okay, can I speak to the whole being empty nester, but in a coupled thing? Well, maybe I can't. I don't know. Do I want to? So we're seeing how that goes. So I'm not sure. Are you single? Are you empty nesting? Are you what is your experience these days?
Well, my sweetie and I have a place together in Portland, Oregon, and we're just really enjoying the quiet. We both were in food service before.
Yep.
And so we like the fact that we have a weekends off now.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, and I have 2 adult children that live far enough away, and one of them is extremely afraid to be anywhere out of her home. She's sheltering in place to excess. She's really upset about the whole pandemic, and it just has it's created a sense of anxiety in her that I can't reach. And so I really have to keep track of her, and I'm worried about her, but she's not allowing anybody to be in her house, and she doesn't go anywhere. And it's rough. And then my other daughter, we've been back and forth. She lives in Scottsdale, Arizona. So we go back and forth as much as we can. Although this year has been all about me getting well and then starting this new benefit company. So I really do resonate with what you said earlier about just having that inner peace. I still feel connected to them, and I don't feel sad that we're not together, because I didn't look at it quite like that. Although I did have issues with some of the old trauma that popped up during 2020 for me, had to do with realizing who my parents were and things that had happened to me that I didn't remember. And when I did, and I tried to approach my mother about it, she was real poo-pooey on the whole thing and very dismissive, and rolling her eyes like it really wasn't a big deal. And it was a huge deal. And so I gave her months of an opportunity to just, soothe my heart and apologize. All I really wanted was her to acknowledge, so that I could put that away and move on. Because I'm not a vindictive person. I don't like revenge. I don't like holding anybody's feet to the fire. I just want to be happy. And that's where the Pollyanna part of my life came into play. And so I basically divorced my parents because they just were, they represented a really painful, evil, awful, abusive time that was very much, they were aware it was not an accident. It wasn't just poor parenting. And so when I realized what had happened, it was time for me to say, okay, I need to have some healthy boundaries. And it was really good learning curve for me. So I think the only smidge of regret, maybe that's not even the right word, would just be that I missed that extended family fun, because there was always a lot of laughter and music playing and good food everywhere, and lots of people around. And it's so quiet now that the contrast is beautiful, and my heart feels at peace for the only time in my life on the holidays, to be honest. So I don't think I'm an empty nester. I mean, I am an empty nester. My daughters are on their own, and yet I don't feel like it. I still feel like they're in my nest. I think my nest just got bigger. So now my nest
love
extends
that.
all the way to Arizona and all the way to California.
Yes.
And I feel really good about that. So,
Yes, that's
but I do
beautiful.
think about the people in my superpower groups on Facebook that they're really sad. There are a lot of
Yes.
them that are really
Yes,
upset.
absolutely. No,
Yeah, so
and,
I
and
think
that, and
about
that's where
them.
this is coming from, is this idea, well, hang on. Because I'm
Yeah,
actually going to say I somewhat I hear you on tricky. I mean, mine is with my dad. Definitely years of trying to figure out. It took years to figure it out, and now I understand what it is. Definitely controlling, particularly around finances, but also very undermining, but in such a way that was just very subtle, but quite far-reaching. And as time went on, realizing that. And for a while, I did fully cut contact. What's been an interesting journey with that, and again, it's this beautiful difference of knowing it's not Pollyanna ignoring or dismissing or condoning. It's the same with the two abusive ex-husbands. It's not, and when I say abusive, I mean abusive.
yeah,
like fully in all the parameters abusive. Not saying that lightly. I am incredibly lucky to be alive. So not dismissing or condoning or Pollyannaing, saying something didn't happen when it did. But what was really interesting, and absolutely where there is physical harm, we have a universal contract to remove ourselves from harm. This is part of the whole contract with the world, with the universe, to remove ourselves. So again, it's not saying stay put. So remove yourself from harm, get out of that. But what I learned was really interesting, that is that there's physically removing yourself, but the physical removal doesn't really help with the psyche, emotional letting go.
Right.
I had second ex-husband, he lives in a completely different country. He'd never been here in Australia. He'd never seen the place I'm in now. And yet I was manifesting him through my ongoing reliving in my conversations in my head. It was, it was so real, because our thinking to us looks so tangible and so real, that it really did look like I had him in the corner of my lounge. And the epiphany hit that even though it had been years since being physically with him, and he'd never been in this place, I was bringing him into this place through my thinking. And part of that thinking was, yes, until or if they say or do something, then I won't get closure. So it's first of all understanding from whose side the closure is coming. Also realizing that I don't actually have to intellectually understand. I had it in my head that I needed to understand. So it was like replaying the whole thing to try and understand. Why did they do this? Why did they say this? We say and do what we say and do because even these really evil people, even these really toxic, difficult, abusive people in our life, even they have within them the seed of innate resilience and well-being. We all do. It's just that those that are acting in a harmful manner, they are acting from a disconnection to that. They don't even know that they have inner wisdom. They don't even know that they have inner resilience. We act on the stories in our head, and we're told that the outside world is the cause of our feelings. We said, my husband's pissing me off. My kids are driving me crazy. My job is frustrating me. We are told it's the outside world. And
Right.
it's not the outside world. It's our thinking about the outside world. Again, don't get me wrong. There is a physical world out there. If you fall over, it hurts. If someone hits you, it hurts. Not saying everything's complete illusion and there isn't a physical world, but our experience is our thinking about it, not the actual situation.
Exactly.
And so they are responding to a story in their head. But we then we see their outer behavior and we tell a story about it, which often involves an egocentric understanding, often fear-based, often reinforcing beliefs that we're not worthy or what, all that crap. And so we look at other people's crappy behavior and we take it on as being some reflection of who we are, when it's a reflection not of who they are, but the thinking that they're having in that moment. And so that's the other problem. People look at other people's behavior and they go, that's a reflection of who they are as a core being. And so respond in anger, respond in that way. But they're responding to the fear-based story in their head, which is fear-based feelings and misunderstanding where that's all coming from. And so they are responding in the only way they know how in that moment. Not saying you should stay on the receiving end of it. But what was really wonderful, when that penny hit, when it dropped, when I understood it as a truth deep inside me, not just an intellectual thing, I didn't have to do anything more. Suddenly I gave myself permission to stop holding on to the two ex-husbands in my story. Suddenly it meant that I got to look at my father in a different way. He's still a pain in the ass. Oh, look, he still is. He still is. But I get to look at it. I get to show up in the present moment with a possibility for something different to arise without me having to try and do anything, if I want to.
That's right.
I don't know if anything of that resonated. So without knowing the full of what your thing is with so this is not a prescription that, oh, now you need to do anything with your parents or family, but just if there's anything still hanging on, even though you're physically not seeing them, but if there is still a little bit holding on.
There's still some grieving happening, which is happening.
It might well be just allow, if anything of that sort of bubbled and resonated, it might show itself in a different, refreshed way of experiencing that situation, and them, even if it's to the point of being able to finally, with loving compassion, you're over there now.
Yeah, exactly. That's what feels right.
Without having to figure out why they did what they did, or needing them to say anything or be anything or do anything. It is simply they did whatever they did because they had thinking, fear-based thinking, and that gave fear-based feelings that they probably didn't understand, where, all the rest of it, and they did what they did.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yep. I keep getting this idea bubbling up that I forget to tell you because I'm so entranced with what you're saying. I was speaking with someone once about my fear of confrontation.
Yeah.
And she knew the details of a good portion of my earlier life. And she said, "Are you serious? Look what you've lived through. You've confronted and come out alive over and over and over again. You're an excellent person to confront things." And whoosh, just like that, I wasn't afraid of confronting anything anymore. It was so great. I loved the way she phrased that. She was like, people who are afraid of confrontation have usually encountered some horrifying things to be able to come to that conclusion, but they're just backwards in their thinking. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, add a little extra cherry on top. The confrontation in the present moment to whatever is happening in your life has got nothing to do with intellect or head knowledge or strategy or tool. It's your inner resilience. And clearly you have displayed inner well-being and resilience throughout your life.
That's right. That's a good way to look at it.
You know, so the fear then is, to me, is actually very natural. Up here, the worry and fear, will I cope? I'm just working with another lovely lady who she's got some fear going on about, well, the nature of impermanence, but in specific relation to her children. She's started pondering the truth of impermanence and the fact that, yes, there is, we don't know the future. Maybe one of her children may die before her. And she's really fixated on that in such a way that is, quite debilitating. Yeah, exactly. And it's not to say that that's not a possibility. So it's just finding this way of going, well, yes, that is one of many possibilities, but you don't know the future.
Exactly.
You don't know. But more to the point, it's not that you don't know that that is a possibility that could happen. It could. But more to the point is that she's telling herself that if that happened, she wouldn't cope. And I'm going, you don't know that. And in fact, I can guarantee that you have inner resilience. And I promise you that it's not about approaching up here in your head. When, heaven forbid, should that ever happen as part of your future, I promise you that you will respond. You will cope. You will. I'm not saying you won't, and this is not saying, and this is the difference between toxic positivity, that is sort of kind of coming at this space that you're not allowed to have any bad feelings whatsoever. You're not allowed to have any bad thoughts. It's all about being actively, no. We're not saying that you're not going to have sadness. We're not saying you're not going to have fear and anger and all the stuff, because we're humans.
That's right. That's what this is all
about.
It's
all about. But it's about knowing that you can have all that experience and not suffer it.
Right. What do they say? Suffering is optional.
It
Things
is.
are going to happen.
Yeah, suffering is the extra layer of topping that we really don't need. That's not to say that it's not going, you're not going to have difficult experiences, but and then to preemptively think that you are going to suffer at an extra level. Yeah, totally unnecessary.
Right.
Totally unnecessary. We don't need to do that. And so bit by bit, we're working through that. Just and if it's whatever intuitively arises in the moment in a discussion, but it's just pointing back to resilience.
Yeah. Pointing
back to, we've managed here and you managed there, and oh yes, but this is a really different one. This is my kids. And I'm going, I know, and I'm not dismissing the fact of the importance and significance of that relationship. And I'm not, but that's still thinking in the moment. It's still thinking that you're having about what how you may or may not respond.
Right.
And then you're worrying about that.
Right. And that worrying doesn't help with
anything. It doesn't help. And it's illusory because it hasn't happened. And you really, really don't know how you'd respond. You can imagine how you think you might respond, but that's imagination. And and so if it's imagination, then why not? I mean, so if everything that we're sort of kind of thinking about what may or may not be is imagination, then why the heck are you imagining the worst?
Right. You can imagine anything you want.
I mean, you can imagine anything you want. Why would you do that? Why do that? I mean, why even? This hurts. Well, why do you keep doing it? And that's just this. Well, because we've made a big worship and idol of crappy thinking and feelings in this society.
Yeah.
you know, that, oh my God, that's really important. No, it actually isn't. And yeah.
Yeah. The
I don't-
martyrdom bit.
you know,
Oh,
serious stick insect here. That one took that took a while for that to really hit me as a truth, and I resisted it like nobody's business for years. You know,
fair enough. I think we all do.
I actually talking stories that yeah, I think one of the things that when I the co-authored book I wrote last year, yeah, was telling the story, part of my story. And I think one of the things I realized at the end of it is, yeah, well, I've said it, but it isn't me. I almost felt, and then and from writing the story to having it published and then having to promote the damn thing, I'm going, but
Right.
it isn't freaking me. It felt really quite overwhelming that this thing is now kind of engraved in stone.
Yes.
I've moved so far away from what that was that it felt really bizarre to be talking about it.
That's where I'm at. I've got part of my story written. And after I was done, it was so cathartic to write it and have it be done. But then I haven't published it. And it's not because I'm afraid. It's because it's like, well, that's not even who I am anymore. Do I really want that spread to the masses now with my name attached to it? I don't think so.
No. Well, then you know what? You did your first, call it your first draft.
There you go. That's a great idea.
You know, no one said just because you've got something complete that it has to be published. It's your first draft. Go back to basics again.
Yeah, and therapy big time.
yeah. No, absolutely. No,
that's a good point.
No, exactly. You know, nothing we do is solid. So, okay, we've been chatting. Look, and see, this is the thing of talking in wisdom and not following slides anymore, because Lord knows I can't. But anyway, so what we've kind of been talking about is kind of really where we've been getting to anyway, is this notion of, well, where do our emotions actually come from? Emotions are not, so we're told in society that our feelings are coming in direct response to the outside world and the circumstances and the people, and we kind of just primed to say that. And that's from childhood. We're told that, you know, we innocently lead our kids into that, oh, you're upset, did so-and-so take your toy, did, you know, every book, movie, song is talking about someone doing something or what have you, and us having feelings about it. And so we're pretty much primed to believe that it's external to us. And really, when we think about that, it's no wonder we go around in a mess of behavior, because that's bloody frightening. Really, if that were true, if it really were true that the outside world caused some internal response in us with no filter in between, that's bloody scary.
Yeah, it is.
Really,
that's a good way to look at it.
It is, and thankfully it isn't the case. That's not how it works. We, the three principles are the mind, as in both that, you know, universal mind, the consciousness, so our ability to perceive our experience, and thought being the energy that takes formless into form. That is how we create the world we live in through our thinking in the moment. And so our feelings are in response, so to the thinking that we're having in the moment. And that thinking is, in fact, energetically open to limitless possibility. But what we do is we have our consciousness in putting life, breathing life into a particular thought. So basically, a thought pops into our head automatically. We can't stop thoughts popping in our heads. We have tens of thousands of them a day. Can't stop them from happening. Don't even need to try. An emotional nervous system response happens in response to that. We interpret that, we interpret what we're thinking, we create a meaning out of it, and that is in fact what we're responding to. Yes, there's a physical world, get out of the way of moving vehicles, all that sort of stuff is required, of course, but what we experience of the moving vehicles in our life is the story that we're giving to it, and we have infinite stories we can tell of something. And just because we were telling a story of something for decades doesn't mean that we have to continue telling that. And I think we get so caught up in identifying with particular meanings that we've given things. We attach solidity to them. We attach identity to them that it feels impossible. But if I don't think that anymore, then does that mean that I was wrong? Does that mean I was this? No, it doesn't mean anything. It was just a thought and you had a meaning. Is it useful to you? Does it bring you closer to your inner wisdom and joy, or doesn't it? If it doesn't, let it go.
Right. Pretty straightforward.
What's that?
It's pretty straightforward.
It is pretty straight. And this is the nature of our inner resilience and well-being and the mechanics of it all. It is actually that bloody simple. It's just that we make things a lot more complicated for ourselves than is necessary. And that is supported by an overly complicated societal structure and belief systems. And I see it in psychology now. People are desperately clinging to their pathologized labels of diagnosis. But I'm anxious avoidant, I'm PTSD, I'm depressed, I'm this, I'm that. And I'm going, no, you're not. You're having some anxious thinking in the moment. You're having some depressed thinking in the moment. You had gone through a trauma, no doubt. It was a really crappy experience. And your body has a nervous system and it's doing stuff, and may still be a little bit out of whack and sending up, flares every so often as warnings. Right. And that's okay. Like, you're still okay. Your core being is still okay. And you don't have to interpret those nervous system flares anymore as something solid.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's not to say, again, not to say Pollyanna and that you don't have a nervous system and it's not doing shit. It is, right. But it's just, and it's not saying all that stuff didn't happen. And it's not saying that you did something wrong by thinking about it in that certain way. All of that is just not what we're saying. But is it helpful in you to continue? And if it's not helpful, then why do it?
Right, just stop it.
Stop it. You don't have to. You literally don't have to think that way. And that can be so profound. You don't actually have to think, but surely I do because no, you don't. And so that's this whole emotions come from, the truth about where our experience. And okay, in relation to this particular topic of redefining the holidays, whatever is going on in your particular situation, if you've got a whole story about it that you've been telling yourself that is giving rise to crappy feelings, do you have to keep telling that story? Would you like a different experience? Do you believe that it's possible if you have a different experience without anything changing, without having to have the family go into family therapy or swap your family for someone else or needing $1 million or anything like that? Asking yourself that and sitting with that and seeing where you're at with that. I think if there's anything I want people to take away from all this is to know that you have this inner resilience, that you're okay no matter what.
Right. That's brilliant.
And yeah, because like everyone's going to go, well, okay, in order to be okay, I need family therapy, I need the money, I need something different in me out there in order for me to be okay. And I'm here to say, regardless of whether anything changes or doesn't change, you're already okay.
Yeah. And the difference could just be how you think about it, like you just explained.
And just being, and it's not actively thinking. It's not asking you to go into analysis of what that thought is, or controlling the thought, or controlling the emotion, or anything like that. It's just, it's allowing whatever that little system is doing to do, not adding an extra layer of meaning or judgment on it, because thoughts ebb and flow. Thoughts and feelings ebb and flow like the tide. So if you just let it do its thing and not get freaked out about it, and not add that extra layer of meaning, well, you'll just notice, the consciousness within you notices that it's just doing its thing. I'm having a momentary whatever, and that's okay. I'm okay even if I'm having whatever momentary whatever I'm having, because the core of me is not that. The core of me is my inner resilience and inner wisdom, and it's always there, and it will always be there. So no matter what is going on, I'm always okay.
I like your analogy of the tide. I'll be able to hang on to that. That's great.
Yeah, yeah. Because I feel like, and having come out of psychology, therapeutic grief counseling background, I think the biggest connections that I'm making, the difference between that approach to life, the universe, and everything, to this, to the three principles is, and this way of being in the world, is that those methods, those frameworks are pointing away from wisdom. They're pointing away. Well, firstly, they're based on an idea that we're fucked up in some way, pardon the French, but that we are. There's something broken, we need to fix it. And there's something wrong that needs a solution to it. You're not going to be okay until you do. To the point that psychology now is, I went all the way through, I've done multiple degrees and all the way through, but I didn't in the end bother registering as a psychologist, because by the time I got to the end for the whole registration process, everything had changed in that field. It went from embracing humanitarian and existential and the spiritual to completely obliterating it and becoming cognitive behavioral drugs and that. And I just went, well, I see absolutely no point in labeling and working within that paradigm, because it's just not. I say now, everyone's walking around with labels. I'm this, I'm that, and the other. And I'm going, no, you're not. But then how do you counter that without denying people their reality that they have in their moment, because you don't want people feeling defensive, but really you're not. Please, I want you to understand that you're not.
We can frame it a little differently, where I'd gone to a therapist a long time ago, and it was about a different topic, and I'd mentioned that I was afraid of the dark, and he said, well, I would be too if I had gone through what you'd gone through in the dark. And I went outside. It was dark at the end of my appointment, and by the time I got outside, I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. All I needed was somebody to validate why I felt that way, and poof, I was gone. So maybe just giving them that, well, now you got your label, so move on. You're done.
And that's it. Exactly. It's not saying, because you don't want to flip on the other way and be like actively avoiding thinking or eschewing or poo-pooing or what that. Hence why I find that much this over analysis of the content of what you're thinking is, well, it just takes you away from wisdom. It is awareness that you have some thinking in the moment is all that is needed. Exactly as you said, it is awareness that is enough. It's like turning on the light switch. It's going, oh, okay, and all the shadows disappear without actually having to draw the shapes of all the shadows and try and analyze them and create. Because you do that, and then you can put form to the damn shadow.
Exactly, and then you got labels all over yourself.
And you're nowhere near to the illuminated center because you've done all that. So it's not denying that what you're saying. So it's finding that balance between allowing for some space for a little bit of storytelling, but not getting caught up in the labeling and the interpreting and meaning giving beyond it happened. It is part of
Right.
your experience. It happened, but you are not the sum of the events that happened to you.
Exactly.
It happened. You experienced it. You can still reframe if you want to, or just let it go if you want to. It's not, and it is profoundly liberating. That is where the freedom lies for us. It's not in manipulating anything externally. It's just simply knowing that we can at any time have a very different experience to the one we had before.
That's right.
I love that. So that's what we've been talking about. So the holiday season, whether you're single, whether you've got the kids, whether you all the stuff. A lot of them have been saying, "Yep, I won't be okay. It isn't okay. I won't be okay. Maybe I'm not, actively mothering. The house isn't full. All the stuff.
Right.
The identity around whatever the holiday season meant, and holding on to that and believing that it's solid, and therefore having a whole lot of presumption about how one will be, about an unknown future. And this is largely where we get ourselves into trouble. Others saying that, they'll never get over the loneliness. It'll never be the same again, all that sort of stuff. And so, it's the absolute catastrophic future stuff thinking that's really not helpful. For me, I found that was not, I said some of those things. Well, interestingly, to me, it was a slightly different story. It wasn't that I was saying that I wouldn't be okay. It was more, I was saying others wouldn't be okay with me. And that was because of the story I told of myself. My decisions that I'd made, as if one crappy husband wasn't enough, I had to have two. And the second one resulted in me. And so hence, so the three, we'll get to that. So the three principles paradigm, I am affiliated with the global 3PGC. There's a website. They have lots of free resources, and there's been a lot of academic research for those who really want intellectual stuff. And what they have been finding is that embodying this understanding of we already have the wisdom within us, we don't have to do stuff, all the stuff we've been talking about, that when people's reported experience of the shifts that come have been incredibly positive to their sense of well-being, to how they respond to their thinking and feelings and therefore behavior, to their sense of, sadness and all the rest of it, and a reduction in anxiety. One of my colleagues used to have clinically diagnosed anxiety, panic attacks. And what she said was really interesting is prior to training in the three principles, she had all the therapy and the clinical psychology stuff and that. And when she finally was understanding that the inner resilience as like a stream of calm water underneath this tide of thought and feeling, as that began to sink in as realization and insight, she was able to see that when the body was throwing up its nervous system response, which she was beginning to see that sometimes the body would just be having its thing. Even though she may not have been actively having crappy thinking, the body was doing its thing. But in the past, she would interpret that and latch on to and give meaning to that. And then the whole thing would be this whole mess. As she moved through living these principles and really feeling it in her being, she noticed that she'd still sometimes have anxiety feelings and a body doing what it was doing, but she just didn't freak out about it. It
Oh, that's
didn't stop her
good.
in her tracks. So it wasn't about not having anxiety. It was just simply not freaking out about it. And
Yeah.
that was done not because of talking about it specifically or applying specific tools or techniques. It just simply came as a natural byproduct of awareness.
Right. That's powerful.
And it is really powerful. And it's again this trying to point to formless with words, and it's bloody hard at times because it's like, yeah, but how? And I'm like, ah! So but it is powerful, and it is the truth, and it is. And so this is how they're getting to these kinds of results. It's not because of a particular anything. It's just a natural byproduct that happens when you're operating from your innate wisdom, your innate well-being. The story here just doesn't make sense at some level to continue playing it out that way.
Right.
Especially if it doesn't feel good. I mean, like, really, we don't keep putting our hand on the hot plate. We might do it once by accident, but we don't keep doing it to
That's for
see,
sure.
So why do that to ourselves emotionally? And that so yeah, the thing for me, I guess, for the holiday season, where I guess I sat with this and pondered it, it was the twice divorce thing, and it's particularly the second crappy husband. The second crappy husband came at a time in my life where I was venturing down a different spiritual path, a path that my family didn't approve of. My daughter had already left home, but only fairly recently. And unfortunately, we were at a stage where she was processing her own grief and that from her crappy father, and I was still in a state of not having fully processed. On top of that, dealing with a major head injury, so everything was just not, things weren't very good, and we weren't in our best selves, and I didn't have this understanding at that time of inner resilience. And so yeah, a lot of projection going on. And so unfortunately that did result in a disconnect between the two of us, and I left the country and went and married this guy who turned out to be another wolf in sheep's clothing. And so I come back after a few years, as opposed to 12 years was a few years. So I was a lot faster at figuring out how to get out of things. Yay. But again, with a suitcase and no job and no money and no, and limping back to Australia with a whole lot of guilt and shame as a big lovely backpack that I was carrying on myself. And yeah, so my first family festive gathering literally was that year I flew back into the country 1st of December. So we were talking 20 odd days later, it was the first family Christmas. And I can tell you right now, I could barely look at anyone in the eye.
Oh.
And of course, at that time, not of course, but the way it played itself out was I couldn't look anyone in the eye. I felt so crappy about myself, but I also projected that as their opinion of me.
Oh.
And so yeah, there was a whole mess going on. Now some of it was some in relation with my daughter. Yes, there needed to be, and there was, and thankfully it happened beautifully, a coming together of heart to heart, and owning one shit and taking responsibility for it, and being able to forgive each other, me mainly, her mainly to me, but there was some behavior that was, but I see now that behavior, now that we understand people's behavior, it may even be abusive, but it's coming from their own insecurity and their own fear thinking and their own story, and it's not to you, it's around you, but it's their stuff, and we make it our stuff.
That makes sense, yeah.
You know, and again, not disclaimer, of course, if there is physical harm, one needs to remove yourself from it, blah, 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 all the stuff. But it really helps when we understand that people are responding to their own story in their head. They are not responding to you. And
That's
so
right.
I'm there thinking I've got story, that they've got story, that no story. Most of it was not, it was illusory. And even in regards to my father, who actively did say shit, to the verge of I told you so and all that sort of stuff, and was quite narky. Yes, he did say those things. Yes, he was. But even still, it was not a reflection of me. It was a reflection of him and his own story.
Yeah, it always is. You're right.
It always is. And when you kind of just get that in your bones, then people can be whatever they are, and it doesn't have to throw you off your game. It doesn't have to.
That's right.
And so that first year, yeah, it felt terrible. It felt really heavy and muddy and just, and it really didn't look, at the time, it didn't look like it could be any different. And I very much spent that time, and for at least a year or so afterwards, where I would mentally rehearse how I would show up. And like, well, they said this and I said this, and so that means this, and la la la, and you get literally putting the psychic battle armor on.
Mm-hmm.
And then wondering why the gatherings were really not pleasant. And when
right.
I remember catching myself at my kitchen sink one day and going, because I was having water in that before heading to one of these family gatherings, and I caught myself mid thinking, because like all that morning I was actually feeling really, really good, and I just started to feel off and out of sorts within my body, and I didn't realize what was going on until I took a moment and took a breath and looked in and went, I've actually started playing the loop. The loop started going in my head about, well, they said this and I said that, and and I'm tensing up and getting really free and armoring myself, and I'm going, what the fuck? I mean, even if they did say that, it doesn't mean that they meant it the way I meant, and it doesn't mean that they're going to say it again, and it doesn't, and even if they did say it again, it doesn't mean that I have to respond to it in that way. Fuck all this. I literally just took the armor off me, left it by the door, and went, no, even if today, I come from a foodie family, so you could appreciate the foodiness. I come from a foodie family who happens to have had money for the foodiness, and there's some really good food here in Sydney. So I have been blessed with being shouted to fabulous foodie lunches and dinners and things that I otherwise were not able to afford out of my own income. So I just sort of thought to myself, no, you know what? I'm just going to go. And if the only thing is that I focus on the lovely food that I know I will be eating, because without fail, I'll go to a lovely restaurant. So I know that I will have lovely food. So if all I focus on is the lovely food and talk about nothing else except the lovely food, that's all I need. I don't have to do or be or show up in any other way. And the beautiful freeing thing was that in showing up present-minded to the lovely food, I actually found myself pleasantly open to what was being shared energetically across the table, instead of the story in my head, instead of thinking that they're thinking this and they're meaning that. And I actually got to experience my family in that moment in a way that I hadn't for so many years, just in that moment, without any need for anything beyond that moment. And that was illuminating. to say the least.
It's
Do I still get caught up in a story in my head sometimes? Yes, I do. My dad's being a little bit of an asshole lately. That's okay. I mean, he is. I mean, he makes being grateful to him at times very difficult. He'll give in one and then take away in another. So it's like, Dad, really? But anyway, but even with that, it's not me, it's him. And I can still choose to look at the things to be grateful about and not take so seriously his displays that are not so pleasant.
Right.
I can. I mean, I'm free to do that.
Isn't that the best part?
It is brilliant. And it doesn't mean that you're letting people get off the hook or anything and all that sort of stuff. Because what's really lovely is when you know you can do that. Because, you know, a lot of, I mean, totally political activist. I was very militant in my bar of, okay, of course, Australia, no guns here, so I'm not saying to that degree, but nonetheless, I'm very vocal, very out in your face, very argumentative that it has to be done, all the stuff. And I am still very political and an activist and speaking out on things, but it's not from anger anymore.
That's good.
It's not from hate. It's not from trying to change. It's not saying that if you see something, if you see injustice, you don't respond. But it's more, I don't have to prepare how I think I ought to respond for some future injustice, because I just know that I'll show up in the moment and it'll be the best I have to give in that moment. And whatever anyone else takes from that will be their wisdom, and I'm not in control of that.
That's good. That's a really good place to be.
Yeah. So in fact, what it means is when you take all that off you, it means that you're far more open to respond to far more things.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really, I love it so much. And so, yeah, so the guilt and all that sort of crap. Yeah, well, I mean, that was my shit. That was my shit. And once I allowed myself to go, well, you know, I made whatever mistakes I made. And from the thinking I was having about myself, the world and the universe at the time, it was the best that I could do. And it's all learning. Yeah, then that just means that I obviously then can show up to myself with kindness and forgiveness, then seek it from others where appropriate. Yeah, just be more open to whatever shows up. And so, yeah, that's me. Today, I don't dread family gatherings. Even when people are, you know, even when dad is dad still, dad is dad. He's better than my experience of him. I should say my experience of him is better than it was, because it's my experience of him. He may still be doing stuff, and he's 85. He'll probably keep doing that stuff. Maybe, but maybe not. Who knows? Because he could have an epiphany any moment now. Who knows? So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, he could be doing the same thing for 85 years. He's 85 and 4 days do completely different. So you have to be open,
right,
to that in yourself and to that in other people, that there is always that potential, because that is the nature of the universe. We are one thought away from a completely different experience.
That's so true.
So who knows? But even if he doesn't, even if he still acts in a contrary kind of way, give one, take away the other, I can choose to focus on the give side and not freak out about, because he's like no one is the controller of your experience. So even if it looks like it's wrapped up in physical things like money and material and all that, right, still your experience of the security of the physical world kind of thing, no one can take that away from you.
That's right.
They can do their shit, but they can't make you change your experience. So just that is just, it's so freeing. It's brilliant. And so it does mean that you can be forgiving towards yourself. And forgiveness does not mean that it's condoning it's crappy behavior. It doesn't mean that you don't hold people to account, all that sort of stuff, but it just simply means that you do it from a space of fearless compassion as opposed to hate and anger and all the rest of it.
Right, exactly.
And with a different understanding of the outcome. It's not, you're not doing it so that, you're doing it because doing it is in fact the nature of our well-being and resilience. It just is. You know, when you're in well-being, forgiveness and unconditional love and all that very, very woo-woo stuff just kind of just happens, you know. Yeah. And then, yeah, it's just that you get to show up. You get to show up differently. And so, yeah, how does that work? Well, I mean, it shows itself up differently in everyone's life, differently, because we're all here with a different, we all have our own unique thought created realities. So how it looks to you and the aha moments and how it sort of trickles. I kind of like thinking of it in terms of those nice the jars of colored sand. And if you started to sort of put some water at the top, and for me, the insights are like watching that water just make its way through the various colored layers of the sand, and it'll follow its own path, and it'll moisten where it needs to moisten, and you'll see lines of it through your experience. And sort of, I like percolating, I like permeating, I like these sorts of visceral terms of what the impact of these insights are on your experience. It just, yeah, again, it's trying to put words to the formless. It's not the words. Swap the words for the ones that work well for you. It's not the words we're pointing to, but kind of it's to the formless experience. So if some other word works better for you, go with that word. But yeah, so it comes with this inner, this clarity and calmness and confidence and enthusiasm, without forcing it. It just happens as a result. The more you tap into what is already there and trust it and follow it and listen to it and see it in action, particularly when those times are really tough, but you see it in action, you see yourself moving forward with it, then you have these wonderful experiences of clarity. And yeah, and so it's asking, that's the asking you to imagine what your life would look like. And this is what one of the things I really love is, we touched on it before, it's not saying don't use your intellect and don't use thinking. We've been gifted it as an ability, so of course use it, but just understand, just the imagining yourself in well-being is actually more realistic than imagining yourself in catastrophe.
Mm-hmm.
So do imagine. So I don't know about yourself, but I certainly used to keep like journaling. But the old form of journaling, the journaling we've been told before, the writing all the shit things, getting it all out, venting it, and they did this and this happened, blah, 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 blah. Heaven forbid, don't do that. I journal now, but I don't journal that way. You do not want to put form into the shit. Exactly. That's like scribing it into stuff. Like, please don't do that, because where we direct our attention and our energy is what we create. So, and there's no point going through the past and rehashing, they said this and this happened, because all you're doing is adding an extra layer of thinking, supposition, assumption. None of our conclusions are accurate, because we can't know the intentions of another person. We cannot infer the intentions by their actions. we cannot personalize it. We do, but we can't, because they're responding to their own story in their head. And as much as they might even try and explain their story in their head, it's like, I'm eating a strawberry. I'm having an experience with that strawberry. I could give you the same strawberry. You could take a bite out of that strawberry, but your experience of that strawberry is not going to be mine.
Right. That's true.
So it's just, I can try and tell you what my experience of the strawberry is, and we may think that we are kind of intellectually wordy wise having a kind of similar experience, but it's not the same.
That's
It
right.
just isn't. It can't be. It just doesn't work like that. So we just can't assume, but we do. We go around assuming, well, they did this, they thought that, and this is why they did it. Oh, and it means this and that and all the other. And then, yeah, we wonder, well, so that's all that we're doing when we're rehashing the past, is we're just reliving and adding extra layer of meaning to an already incomplete and incorrect understanding.
That makes sense.
So journaling that does work is what I call dream day journal. It's present focus, so I am, I have, and it's the imagining in well-being, imagining you in the life that you do want, and writing it in the present tense.
That's great. I love
And writing it from, I mean, it might start feeling like it's coming from your head, and I'm trying to, you know, but eventually you'll get out of your head and you'll actually be writing it, as you said, and have tasted the flavor of writing from inspiration. And it's just, you know, writing what is inclined towards, and just keep doing it. Now, I mean, some people from the manifesting space talk about it like that, and they're talking about it from a results focus. I do this and then this will happen. It's not so much about it for a tool or strategy or result. It's just for the doing, the experiencing, because the result is naturally going to be positive, but we don't have to worry about what that will look like.
That sounds easy.
We are I mean, everything is by nature within ourselves positive and forward moving and resilient and joyful and all the good stuff. That is in fact how the universe is. It is in fact our default factory setting. So when we're in it, whatever comes from that is going to be sweet. It's going to be good. It's going to be beneficial. We don't need to know what that will be. And that's, again, so bloody freeing. And it's not to say that you don't, like, you know, yeah, we are living in a physical world that has calendars, and it's not saying, okay, let's all just go sit in the mountain and not have any, like, sometimes I would like that, but it doesn't, you can still be navigating the world of form and timetables and goals and stuff, but you kind of just do it in a way that is a lot more flexible. I don't know. Yeah. And you'll find your own way. You know, if it feels right, do it. If it doesn't, don't, or you know, allow for. And if you don't know, don't knowing is perfectly okay. Don't knowing is a thing, and we're allowed to not know and not have to do anything about the not knowing, because wisdom will come around the next corner and then you'll know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, what does this living a guide? And so for me, this is all about living a guided life, wisdom guided, heartful wisdom guided life. And what it was, just the main thing, I guess, from it is the world doesn't look scary. We get to see that the stuff may well be happening. There may be a storm, there may be chaos, maybe people doing stuff, all the thing. It's not going to stop, but it's not the thing that is controlling our experience.
Right.
And we don't have to think our way through it. That's not where the answers come from. We get to show up in it, in the present moment, from our, you know, inclination, our intuition, our whatever you want to call it, and whatever will arise will be the best thing in that moment. And we don't need to know what that outcome will be down the track, but it's pretty much, it is guaranteed that if we show up in that wisdom of goodwill and fearless compassion and all that sort of stuff, the knock-on effect is going to be beneficial to all involved. So you
Yeah.
kind of don't have to freak out. And then that is then the not freaking out. It's the calm, it's clarity, it's confidence. It's knowing that you don't have to go in with your battle armor, real or imagined. It's being able to look at those people, including yourself, hands up first, self, and all those others in life that we've labeled toxic and difficult and abusive. And again, not saying that they didn't do shit. They did, most probably, more than likely, they did do actual harm, but it's somehow being able to see the humanity of those people, understanding, not excusing, not saying it's okay, but just understanding at a level that they did what they did because of their own story.
Right.
And their story was scary to them. And they didn't know any better. And they probably never knew that they actually had inner resilience. And we can get really stuck, and we still do. And that's the other thing, that it's just the being okay, regardless of whether we're in wisdom or not in wisdom. We're in this physical body having a physical experience. That does mean that sometimes we get caught in our head and that story looks real, and we are responding to it as if it is really real, and the whole thing, and we still will have those moments. So, but somehow it's like being okay. Yeah. It's this underneath even when stuck in the illusion, there's this little light within you that is shining, that you kind of just know that you will get back to it, and you don't have to do too much or anything really to get back to it. This thinking, this cloud will dissipate, and you'll be back in your innate resilience again, and that's when you can respond. So it's really pretty much like that. So it's somehow it's just not freaking out as much anymore about the difficult experiences. It's being okay no matter what's going on, because you know that you are.
Right.
And I love that. So it's very, this is then fundamentally very, very different in practice as a coach to the other modalities that have you focused on what you're thinking, why you're thinking it, and or the external situation, and tools and strategies to change it in order for you to be okay.
Right.
Those things take care. Everything else takes care of itself when you're in your wisdom. So you kind of don't really need to, and you don't have to chase the wisdom. See, for decades, I thought you had to chase the wisdom. Like you had to actually do something to be in wisdom. Well, you don't even have to do that.
That's easy.
Yeah, it really is. It is that easy, and then you'll have your own epiphanies and insights, and your particular unique jar of colored sand, and how this insight wins its way through it. And that's going to be your experience. There's no right or wrong to it. It will be what it is. But that kind of, so we don't have to chase it now. We don't have to do anything more with this. I love that. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And so this is why I probably, I don't know, so I don't need to worry, I guess. If people think that I'm overly Pollyanna, I guess, well, that's their thinking in the moment, and that it's just that I can't seem to switch off the enthusiasm anymore.
I think it's great. I don't think
it's so goddamn exciting. It is just really exciting. I mean, it is. It's just like I just want. It is. It's hopeful, and it's hopeful not because circumstances necessarily change.
Right. It's just that your awareness changed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that everyone else has that within them too, in their own way.
Mm-hmm. And you just help tease it out, help people understand it and expose it.
This is kind of it. So again, is it coaching? Is it mentoring? Is it this? Is it that? I don't. It's a transformational conversation.
Right. That's good.
just kind of, I think that's it. No, okay, what else did I do? Okay, well, there was, so this is it, oh God, now I clicked on something. I clicked, no, go away. Yeah, I mean, we've had some really good, but what I might do is people can get the, I don't know, we'll figure out because we had some good conversations through this. So whether they get the audio, but then I'm talking over it now, like, we might re-record this as just to the thing, but so all this from next year I'm launching. So this is what I'm launching. At the moment, people can work one-to-one with me, but I'm finally launching a group program. It's been a year in the making, in the sense of just trying to find the way of bringing the form into the formless, and not have it driven by, because all the masterclasses most of us go into are very, particularly in this space, very tool oriented and strategy oriented, and I'm trying to find a way of how the heck do I do this that is experiential, but not having people get fixated on the tool or the strategy.
Right.
And so it's been a year of trying to find the okayness with it all, and from getting out of the head over it and being in wisdom. And I had a really lovely meeting with in a coaching session with Michael Neal, because he comes from an NLP background, and he's like, no, it's not that you. I sort of was a bit still in my acolyte mode, and like you have to be really serious and strict on how you kind of do like, so it's no doing, so it's like the zen of no doing, and literally now that's what it is. It's not saying that you don't do, it's because you can still do, and you can still experiment, and you can still, and it's not saying that you don't do, but it's understanding that you don't have to do, and the doing doesn't necessarily mean what you think it means, and it's that kind of thing. So I am slowly bringing into this transformational conversation the odd thing that arises that might seem, so I quite like a bit of tapping. Right. I do quite like a wisdom oracle, just not because of the superstitious premonition side of it, but more that it can sometimes just speak to that inner wisdom, and allow it to be a springboard for an inner wisdom lesson kind of thing. Right. I like pictorial. So it's been that. So it's been a while in the making to sort of go, well, what is this going to actually look like? And it's still going to be winging it, because really ultimately it's in the transformational conversations around awareness and wisdom and appreciation and kindness, equanimity, the knowing that you're okay even when, and the being present with it all. And it is the unique interplay of those elements in the present moment that is the ground for where our wisdom arises. So it's pretty much going to be winging it, because that's where that's the nature of inspiration and wisdom in the moment. But yeah, so that's what's going to be birthing in January. So this was one of the jumping off points as a, well, this is kind of what we're looking at, and there you go.
Well, this is really good. I'm proud of you. Good job, lady.
Thank you, and thank you for joining me.
I like your style, lady. Thank you for your time.
I'm glad you like my style. Thank you so much. You've given me a lovely boost of confidence. Thank you very much. And have a lovely rest of your day, evening, and year.
Sounds
Stay
good.
blessed.
Have a good night.
You too. Take care.